Hey, how was your day? Tonight's story is about a night bus. Not a bus in the middle of Seoul. Not one of those bright city routes where there is always someone getting on, someone getting off, someone talking too loudly on the phone. This was a small countryside route, the last bus of the night. The kind of bus where the inside lights feel too white, the windows only show darkness, and every stop looks like it was built for someone who has already gone home. And before I tell you what happened, remember this. If you are alone at night and a stranger behind you tells you not to open the door for someone outside, do not decide too quickly which one is the danger. The man in this story had just become a bus driver. He was new, only about a month into the job. And because he was new, he still cared about everything. He checked the mirrors more often than he needed to. He arrived at each stop on time, even when nobody was waiting there. He kept both hands on the wheel. He told himself that even one passenger deserved a safe ride. His route was not busy. It ran through a quiet rural district, where the roads curved around low hills, fields, storage sheds, and old houses with no lights on. During the day it was peaceful. At night it felt different. The road became narrow. The bus engine sounded louder. And when the last route came around, there were usually one or two passengers at most. Sometimes there was nobody. That night, at first, there was nobody. The driver was moving through the dark road with the radio low, trying to stay awake. The heater was on, the windshield was clean, the road ahead was empty. Then, at one of the smaller stops, a young man got on. He looked about the driver's age. Nothing unusual, no big bag, no strange clothes. Just a normal young man getting on the last bus. But the bus was empty, every seat was open. And still, the young man walked past all of them and sat directly behind the driver's seat. Close enough that when he spoke, the driver did not hear him through the bus. He heard him right behind his ear. "I haven't seen you before," the passenger said. "Are you new on this route?" The driver would normally have kept the conversation short. Night driving needs attention. But he was tired, and the empty road was making him sleepy, so he answered, "Yes, about a month." The passenger laughed softly. He said he had lived in the area for a long time. He knew the roads. He knew which turns were dangerous in rain, which stops almost never had passengers, and which families had lived near the old market before it closed. The driver relaxed. It was nice, honestly. On a lonely route, a normal conversation can feel like coffee. So he turned the radio down, then off. And for the next few minutes the young man talked. He talked about the district, about a bridge where cars used to slide in winter, about a school that had been shut down, about a funeral hall that used to stand near the main road. He knew too much, but not in a way that felt frightening, more like someone who had grown up there and never really left. Then the bus reached a red light. The next stop was visible ahead. It stood near the entrance of a cemetery park. During the day, people sometimes went there to visit graves. But at that hour, the place was just a black slope behind a low wall, with one streetlight buzzing over the stop sign. The passenger behind him suddenly stopped talking. The silence was so sharp that the driver noticed it before he noticed the person outside. Then the passenger asked, "Are you going to pick that person up?" The driver looked ahead. Someone was standing at the stop, still, hands together, loose grey-brown clothes. At first, from a distance, the driver could not tell what he was seeing. Then the bus moved closer, and he realized it was a Buddhist monk. An older monk, maybe. His head was shaved, his clothes moved a little in the wind. He was waiting calmly, as if it was completely normal to be standing outside. A cemetery at the last bus stop of the night. The driver said, "If he is a passenger, I have to pick him up." The man behind him leaned closer. His voice changed. Until then he had sounded friendly. Now he sounded afraid. "Think about it," he said. "Why would someone be waiting there at this hour?" The driver kept his foot on the brake. The light was still red. The monk did not move. The passenger whispered, "There is no temple near here." That made the driver look again. The area was quiet. No temple gate. No houses with lights on. No other people. Just the cemetery wall, the buzzing streetlight, and the monk standing under it. The passenger kept talking. "Just pass him. Nobody will know." For 1 second the driver considered it. He really did. He imagined closing the door, pressing the accelerator, and leaving that figure in the mirror. But he was new. He still believed in rules. And another part of him thought, If that really is a monk, and I leave him here, what kind of person am I? The light turned green. The bus rolled forward. The passenger behind him said one last time, "Don't open it." The driver stopped at the line. The air brakes sighed. The front door folded open. The monk stepped onto the bus, and the passenger behind him stopped talking. Before I tell you what the monk did, remember who told the driver not to open the door. It was not the monk. It was the man sitting directly behind him. The monk paid the fare. He looked at the driver and brought his hands together in a small bow. Then he walked to the middle of the bus and sat down. Not behind the driver, not near the exit, the middle. The driver watched him in the mirror. The monk sat straight, both hands resting in his lap. The passenger behind the driver was still silent. That silence began to feel wrong. Only a few minutes earlier, the man had been filling the bus with stories. Now, there was nothing. No cough, no shifting in the seat, no breath. The bus moved away from the cemetery stop. For a while, the only sound was the engine. Then the monk began to chant, quietly at first. So quietly the driver thought he was hearing the tires on the road. Then it grew clearer, low, steady, not loud exactly. But it filled the bus in a way that made the windows feel closer. The driver tightened his grip on the wheel. He had never had a passenger do that before. He looked in the mirror again. The monk's eyes were closed. His mouth moved without hurry. Behind the driver's seat, the young man was a dark shape. The driver could not see his face clearly, only the edge of his shoulder. The driver tried to stay calm. "Sir," he said, "you cannot do that on the bus." The monk did not stop. If anything, the chanting became stronger. Not theatrical, not angry, just firm, like someone holding a door shut from the other side. The driver felt a sudden coldness behind his neck. The heater was still on. The dashboard vents were warm, but the back of his neck went cold. Then, very softly, right behind him, the young man spoke. "See?" The driver almost flinched. "I told you." The voice was close, too close. The driver did not answer. He stared at the road and kept driving. The terminal was only 10 minutes away. 10 minutes. That was all. He told himself he could handle 10 minutes of strange chanting and one nervous passenger. But the closer they got to the terminal, the more the bus felt crowded. That is the part he could never explain. There were only two passengers, one monk in the middle, one young man behind him, but the bus felt full. Not visually, not with bodies, with pressure, like every empty seat had become occupied by something that did not need to be seen. The monk's chant did not break. The road straightened. The terminal lights appeared ahead. The driver had never felt so relieved to see fluorescent lights in his life. He pulled into the final stop. The bus hissed. The doors opened, and out of habit, the driver looked into the mirror to watch his passengers get off. That was when he froze. The seat behind him was empty. The young man was gone, not standing in the aisle, not moving toward the back door, not asleep in another seat. Gone. The driver looked at the front door. Only the monk was getting up. The monk walked slowly down the aisle. The driver wanted to ask where the other passenger had gone, but his mouth felt dry. The monk stopped beside him. For the first time, he looked directly at the driver. His face was calm, not frightened, not surprised, just tired. Then he said, "It is fortunate I met you before something serious happened." The driver could only stare at him. The monk brought his hands together again. Then he stepped off the bus and walked into the terminal light. For a long moment the driver did not move. He checked the mirror, he checked the aisle, he checked every seat. There was nobody. The place where the young man had been sitting was empty, and that was when the driver remembered something. When the young man first got on, the bus had been empty. He had walked past every seat and chosen the one directly behind the driver, close enough to speak into his ear, close enough to make him turn off the radio, close enough to keep him listening. And when the monk appeared outside the cemetery, the young man was the one who became afraid, not the driver, not the monk. After that night, the driver never took that route the same way again. He kept the radio on. He never let a passenger sit directly behind him if the bus was empty. And whenever he passed that cemetery stop, he slowed down. not because he was afraid someone would be waiting there, because he was afraid someone would tell him not to stop. That is the part that stays with me. Sometimes the thing that saves you does not look safe, and sometimes the thing that sounds normal, that laughs with you, the thing that keeps you company when you are tired, is only trying to make sure help never gets on. So tonight, if you ride the last bus home, look at the seat behind the driver, and if someone is sitting there whispering advice, maybe do not trust them too quickly. Sleep well. I'll bring you another story soon.